Well, got his attention.
Yes. He's got a much lighter touch than I do.
All right, Adrian. Go ahead and call the meeting to order.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, council members. Welcome to our February 7th, 2022 City Council meeting. We'll start, as we do, going over the vision statement that you have just recently reaffirmed at your retreat in January, that Belmont will be a vibrant, multi-generational community that incorporates small-town charm and heritage with an entrepreneurial spirit. And I will go over the consent agenda items. We only have 4 this month. The first 2 are minutes from your meetings in January. You have the approval of your regular meeting minutes on January the 3rd, and then your workshop meeting minutes from January the 18th. You also have, for your consideration, an ordinance to authorize the sale, possession, and consumption of alcoholic beverages in the Kevin Lofton Riverfront Park during the Catawba Riverkeeper Foundation's Riverfest event, which will be May 14th from 11:30 a.m. until 4 p.m. You've approved this for the past several years, and that has gone off successfully on the from the perspective of the Catawba Riverkeeper Foundation, so they want to continue doing this, and we have not had any incidents with having alcoholic beverages as part of that event. So that is something that you've seen before. And then the last item on the consent agenda is a bit of good news. At your meeting in January, you approved a capital project ordinance for the Belmont Recreation Center, which is currently under construction. And at that time, we only had $1.5 million from the state, so that's part of the revenue stream for that project. Shortly after your meeting in January, we learned that the state had awarded us a Parks and Recreation Trust Fund, or Part F grant, in the amount of $500,000. So we need to amend the capital project ordinance to increase the share of the project that's being paid for by the state of North Carolina from $1.5 million to $2 million, and decrease the amount that's being paid for by your residents and taxpayers through loan proceeds. So you do have an amendment to that capital project ordinance to reflect the additional state funding for that project. And again, we thank our friends in Raleigh for helping us with this project. So that's all that I have on the consent agenda. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead. Have any questions for Adrian? Make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Well, we need to do that.
So if there are no questions, you can go to commence the regular meeting and with the call to order and setting the agenda.
Okay. Ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's want to do the invocation, Jim?
Before I do that, I'll move to set the agenda.
Got the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Agenda set. Okay.
I'll do the. Yes. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessings you've bestowed on us. We ask for your grace and wisdom in transacting the matters we have before us tonight, and in celebrating the achievements that we'll be celebrating at the beginning of the meeting. We ask your continued guidance to us as we wrestle with the issues of the day and seek to lead the city to greater heights. And we ask all these things in your name. Amen.
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 I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have some special recognitions tonight. Miss Polly Lowe. I'll bring her up here. How you doing, Polly? Doing okay? Good. We're going to give you a proclamation recognizing you for your 100th birthday. How about that, huh? All right. All right, I'm going to read this to you, both of you. Whereas proclamation recognizing February 7th, 2022 as Pauline Lowe Appreciation Day in the city of Belmont. How about that, huh?
February 7th is going to be your day, where it's Lowe Appreciation Day in Belmont.
Yeah.
Appreciation
Yeah.
Day.
Yeah. Whereas Pauline Smith, affectionately known as Polly, was born in Belmont on December 4th, 1921, to parents John and Lily Smith. And whereas Polly married Conley Stowe of Belmont in 1936 and was blessed with a daughter, Sheila Stowe O'Daniel. Conley was killed in World War II in France in January of 1945, and whereas on June 18, 1949, Polly married James Lowe, also of Belmont, and they were blessed with a son named Keith Lowe, who was on our police department. Remember? Yeah. And whereas Polly was blessed with 4 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild, in addition to being a wife, mother, and mama, she was an active member of East Belmont Baptist Church. And whereas Polly spent her entire career working in the textile industry, she worked at the Crescent Mill, the National Mill, and retired from Beltex. And whereas Polly is the matriarch of the Lowe family, has inspired her family and others with her faith and dedication to the Lord through the many trials of her life. Now, therefore, I, Charles Martin, Mayor of the City of Belmont, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim February 7th, 2022 as Polly Lowe Appreciation Day in the City of Belmont in recognition of her 100 years of life. Witness thereof, I have set my hand to cause the seal of Belmont, North Carolina, to be affixed February 7th, 2022. Okay? All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. Take care. So shooting any hoops?
It's still a little bit.
A little bit.
Thank you so much.
See you. Congratulations, Polly.
You're welcome.
Next, we have recognition of the North Carolina Association of Festival and Events Awards for Main Street programs Moonlight on Main Event. Bill?
Hundred years old. Wow.
That's a lot.
So, got a few notes here in case I don't miss out anything. The first of last weekend, and the first of the week, our program staff, myself, Cassidy Lackey, and Morgan Abernathy, we attended the North Carolina Association of Festivals and Events, and it's called the Show Fest. It's their annual conference. It was a multi-day conference in Charlotte, full of educational sessions by industry leaders and connections with other event professionals from around the state. So we learned a lot on how to really make our events even better. The conference wrapped up with an annual awards recognition ceremony, and we were extremely happy to receive 4 awards. At this time, I'd like to ask that Cassidy and Morgan please come up here with me. And I'd also like to bring up some of our board members who are here with us as well. We have Jennifer Church, our board chair, Amy Bosar, our board member, our design committee chair. We have Elizabeth Simcox, our treasurer of our board, and Mr. Al Law, who is on our board, and our economic vitality committee chair. At the awards luncheon, it was full of other community staff city staff, volunteers from around the state, highlighting all of the events and festivals that had taken place over the last year. We were excited. We received 4 awards. We submitted a photograph of the moon hanging in Stowe Park with a lot of other activities. So we actually received Best Event Photo for the year.
Wow. Great.
Another recognition we received was Best Brochure for an event. During Moonlight on Main, we had our Go-Go art projections, and our opening night, we had, designed by Morgan and Cassidy, a brochure highlighting each of the artists, the projections, and so we submitted that for recognition. And so we actually won, recognized for Best Brochure for an event in the state of North Carolina. So good job, Morgan and Cassidy. Then we got to the big awards. And actually, we brought home 2 of the biggest awards that they presented. The first was the best event within an event. And so our Go-Bo art projections around downtown actually was recognized as the best event within, or best event associated with an event. So we got a nice plaque.
Huh.
And then to wrap it up, we were called up and recognized as the best event of the year. So,
How about that?
as we all know, it took a lot of work, and we had a lot of collaboration and partnerships with a lot of other organizations in Belmont and in Gaston County. And so I think that's what made the event so great, is a lot of organizations coming together to collaborate. And of course, a lot of volunteers putting forth a lot of time, effort into the event. So thank you for all that you did to make this the best event in the entire state of North Carolina. Oh, Kevin is on the report.
Kevin just works here.
Mark and Jim are our board members that represent council, so we appreciate your leadership that you provide to us during our committee meetings and on our board. So it was a great day for the city of Belmont being recognized for some great work. So,
I will
Adrian,
say, you guys did a fantastic job with the Moonlight on Main. It was just unbelievable. Unbelievable. And we appreciate all the hard work that went into doing that.
it was fun,
Thank
but
you.
we're glad it's over with. And can we get a picture? Yeah. Mark, Jim, come on, y'all were part of this group. Come on, Kevin. Oh, this is
Put Kevin in the back.
That's funny.
Come on, get in here.
Good job. All right, that moves us on to the regular agenda. Anybody signed up for public comment?
We don't have anyone signed up for public comment tonight.
Good.
I think we need to move to approve the consent agenda, so I will so move.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved, okay. Nobody signed up for public comment, so let's get to the public hearing on Julia Avenue Subdivision. I think Melissa's handling that.
Let's go into public hearing.
Move to go into public.
Public hearing?
Second.
All right.
Okay.
Well, we got to vote on going into public hearing.
All in favor of going to public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Public hearing, we are.
Is there a sign-up sheet for this?
No, I don't have one. Oh, yeah, there's one. I'm sorry.
Could you pass it down? Could you pass it down?
Charlie.
Sure.
Okay, so, Mr. Russell? Yeah, okay, gotcha. I want to make sure. So this is, for the audience and public, this is a different type of proceeding that you'll see at council meetings. Most of our votes on zoning matters and ordinances and everything are called legislative action, where you just hear from anybody that really wants to speak, and the council can make a decision, vote up or down without any kind of stipulation or requirement. It's just up to them whether they approve or disapprove. This is called a quasi-judicial proceeding, which is a little more strict. It's like a court action. You'll hear things that you would likely hear in a courtroom, like there'll be witnesses, there'll be parties, there'll be testimony, sworn testimony, there'll be cross-examination potentially, there'll be the panel, the council serves sort of as the capacity of a judge or jury rather than just a legislative body. So this is a little more formality. Now, what the formality that isn't so formal is that we don't abide strictly by the rules of evidence like you would in a courtroom, and other things as far as testimony. In order to expedite the proceeding, the witnesses can testify in a narrative form rather than being led by questions. So this is a little bit different, but that's the type of hearing that's required for this petitioner to obtain what's called a special use permit. So this is that can be explained in a little bit by the witnesses. So having said that, let's see, we don't have we have a file. It usually is up here. Okay. I know we've got, John, you've got Mr. Russell that's going to be representing the petitioner. You have Mr. Kennedy, is that right? And you have another witness?
Yes, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown and Mr. Kennedy. Okay, there's Beth Crosby. Crosby, sorry. Now, are you, that's fine. Let me just caution you that your testimony is, you'll be sworn. Your testimony is supposed to be factual. Any fact, if it's opinion testimony, it'll be disregarded. But factual testimony is relevant. And there's is there Mr. King? Right. Okay, Mr. King. Yes, sir. Same thing. Yes, sir. For you. Okay, so do you wish to be heard? Yes, sir. Okay, so if you four would come forward right now, let's be sworn. The ones I call Mr. Brown, Crosby, Kennedy, and King.
You don't need to.
No. Come on forward. You'll actually, all four of you will place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. Each of you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. Now, before we get started, there are several questions I asked the council as a matter of policy and procedure, and I think most of you are familiar with it. Number one, do any of you have a financial or pecuniary interest in the outcome of this proceeding?
No.
Do any of you have any prejudice, bias, or other reason where you can't render a fair and impartial verdict based solely on the testimony that's going to be presented?
No.
Okay. Having heard that, I declare this panel duly constituted. And I believe our first witness, Ms. Lockamy, will be presenting for the city. And you can proceed with a
Does she need to be sworn?
Huh?
Does she need to be sworn?
Oh, were you not in that group? Okay, yeah, I need you to be sworn. No. Left hand, you swear affirm the testimony that you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you for that.
Good evening. I'm Melissa Lockamy, the project planner for this case before you this evening. The request is Special Use Permit 2021.03, and as a request for the creation of 5 lots smaller than the average lot width in the area. The Gaston County parcel ID numbers are 188367 and 188370. The current owners are Nona and Regis Breland, and the applicant is Cameron Kennedy. The subject property is located on the north side of Julia Avenue between South Point Road and Greenwood Avenue. So before we go into the project specifics, I'm going to give you a little bit of information on our current land development code standards and what it means for these subject properties. So these properties are classified as infill lots. That's opposed to new subdivision creation and greenfield development. These infill lots, when there's creation of new infill lots, the minimum lot width is established by taking the average in the area within 300 feet and within 1 block length. And the larger of those numbers is the minimum lot width required. So for this property, by right, there are 3 new lots that would be allowed with the current average. This is different than the 55-foot wide lots for street lots in new major subdivisions. Like I said, that's new development. But for the infill lots, right now it's important to note that there's 3 lots that could be created from the 2 that are existing. So with administrative staff approval, 1 house could be built on each of the lots for 2 houses. Or they could recombine this and 3 lots could result. This would be an exempt subdivision, but either single-family homes or duplexes could fit on the lots of this size. That exempt subdivision would result in no tree save requirement, no sidewalk construction, and no architectural standards as conditions of approval. So that being said, Chapter 5 of our Land Development Code authorizes a special use permit process, and the applicant is proceeding with a request to create lots smaller than the average. This is allowed if council makes the required findings, and those findings include the intent that the new development that is approved will be compatible and fit in with the existing neighborhood in the existing area. So the results of this process can result in increased development outcomes that we might not normally see if it were developed by right with administrative approval. For example, the architectural standards, the sidewalk in this case, if approved through the special use process, a water line would be extended, and this property would now be subject to tree save requirements. So that's a little explanation of the difference between by right and then what the special use process can result in. So now more about the specific subject properties. Like I said, there's 2 parcels, and they're located on that north side of Julia. It comprise 1.19 acres, and it takes up the whole area between South Point Road and Greenwood Avenue. There's 360 feet of road frontage along Julia. As you can see, there's no curb and gutter in this general area, but there's a future capital improvement sidewalk project identified, and this property would add sidewalk to that and line up with that future project. There are 5 houses proposed, and that width at the road frontage is 72 feet at Julia Avenue. So as you can see further in your packet, there was an analysis of the average lot width. That was found to be right about 120 feet for the area. If you remove outliers, it's still about between 100 and 120 feet for the average in the area. The proposed lots start at a 1/4 acre, with the largest being towards South Point Road, and they gradually get a bit smaller, ended up with 1/5 of an acre at the Greenwood Avenue corner. So in reviewing this application and this project, we shared the known traffic and safety concerns in this area. The applicants responded by reducing the number of driveways on Julia. As you can see, they moved one of the 5 to the Greenwood Avenue side. They've designed their driveways to allow turnaround and area to maneuver in the rear, which could allow a safer movement onto Julia. So they designed that turnaround area there, and they have also offered to construct 5-foot sidewalk along the frontage that will align with the future capital improvement program budget. In addition to that, they have also volunteered to commit to architectural standards that we would not normally be able to impose. So they have agreed that these homes to be constructed, if approved, will be constructed in substantially similar style to those pictures provided. Those are similar to the new construction in the area and will specifically be limited to cementitious fiberboard, also known as hardy board, brick, stone, or wood shake materials. So one of the required findings is that this request is consistent with the regulations in the adopted land use plan. As a certified planner, I have reviewed and evaluated this project and found that if it developed as conditioned, it will meet or exceed the land development code requirements. It will be compatible with the single-family residential uses envisioned in the general residential zoning district. And it complies with the comprehensive land use plan, and that is on the edge of a village center. And this edge is exactly the transition from the higher density to the lower density single-family residential surrounding it. So it is staff's findings that these meet are consistent with the adopted land use plan and regulations. So should the council make the required findings to grant this permit and this request, staff requests the following conditions be added to the approval. There is one additional condition that I added, number 1, that the development must comply with the land development code, development standards manual, and other applicable regulations as standard and really should be included across the board. So I've added that from when the agenda was published. But the other conditions cover infrastructure, architectural standards, site-specific requirements. All right, so on this slide, you see the findings that council must make to grant this permit. The burden of proof is on the applicant to submit evidence to make these findings. Starting on page 69 of your agenda package, you can see the applicant's response. And with this, I hereby submit my staff report and testimony into the record for your consideration.
Okay, your report's admitted to the record. No objection, Mr. Russell? Okay. Does that complete your testimony? You'll stand there just a minute. So our procedure now is, Mr. Russell, if you have cross-examination, you'll question, and then the council can question after your cross.
All right, Melissa, I do have a few questions for you about the findings that you have presented. What's the current zoning of those parcels? GR?
It is general residential.
That will not change under this special permit?
Correct, it will not change.
And no changes requested?
Correct.
As far as the requirements of the LDO for lot construction, things like setback, the size of the structure, building type, all of that is complied with by the site plan?
Yes, all of those specific are in compliance with the land development code.
Okay, so no changes to the LDO or LDC that have been requested as far as the lot construction or type?
Correct.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the Belmont future land use plan or comprehensive land use plan reference being at the edge of the village center? What is that? What are you referring to in this 520 what this area is supposed to be in the future land use
Very good. In our comprehensive land use plan and our future land use map, there have been identified, I think, approximately 4 to 6 village centers. And these are seen on the map in the little circles that are red circles. And within this area that is envisioned, and the specific area is a good example of the village center where we have commercial core and then some higher density residential surrounding it. And then that transitions out to the larger single-family residential lots. So the idea is that in different places throughout the city, residents will have access, convenient access to goods and services with a sound transition to the single-family residential. And so this particular property is right on the edge of that. So we would see like the townhomes, for example, around the commercial area transition to single-family, smaller lots to larger lots.
And so the concept for these two parcels would be residential or some sort, is that in the future?
Yes.
And being on the edge, this would be what's planned of, is slightly smaller lots, not quite a townhome or something like that, but also not a larger lot.
You could say that, that's correct.
We talked a little bit most about building materials. Typically, the land development code does not regulate building materials when you're doing fire development.
Correct.
So it's just through the SCP, the special use permit, that you can have some discussions with the home builder or the applicant about what materials.
I would point out that we only have those discussions if the applicant volunteers to offer that as a condition of approval.
And that's been something that's volunteered in this
Correct.
situation. And the building materials that you read out to the council, cementous, fiberboard, retardant panels, and bricks, so those are consistent with building materials in the surrounding neighborhood, is that right?
That is correct. That is similar.
One of the things that we referenced in our application for here was a special use, I guess at that time it's called traditional use permit, that was approved in 2018, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, the correct the lot, you verified all the lot widths that were submitted.
Yes.
And these lots are consistent, if not slightly larger than the lots that were approved in this area back in 2018, is that right?
That is correct.
You talked a little bit, so as far as is there water on this site at this time?
There is not a water line that would service these properties. That would have to be constructed.
And is the applicant going to construct the infrastructure to bring water to?
Yes, that would be required for this approval.
And that's been discussed and the applicants agreed to do that.
Yes.
So this project will add some infrastructure to the city, to this property.
That is correct.
Can you tell us about the dimensions, the sidewalk, what is that going to be?
The sidewalk is proposed for 5 feet in width, which is our standard residential sidewalk width.
And you talked a little bit about the capital improvement plan. Can you elaborate a little bit about how this will tie in eventually to the capital improvement plan?
I do. Now, the specific details will be determined at construction plan approval phase, which is the next step if approved. So right now, we have it as a condition of approval that the details of the exact alignment and location will be determined as the site detail and the site construction details are further developed. But no matter what, there will be a 5-foot sidewalk installed and constructed and installed, and it will be constructed in a location that will have the required ADA ramps, and that will then be designed intentionally to line up with any future city sidewalk projects on Julia. It's important to note that because these details haven't been worked out, and that's common at this stage, that there could be potential right-of-way dedication or easement dedication required either for a sidewalk, but we've also, through our technical review committee, have found that there may be right-of-way dedication to cover existing pavement that might encroach. So there's some common details that have to be worked out. It's not unusual for infill properties. So I hope that I'm answering your question and confirming that the 5-foot wide will be constructed, but the exact location will be determined, and it could require the applicant to either dedicate right-of-way or an easement for that and some other issues that are site-specific.
But typically, when you dedicate an easement for sidewalk, it's for maintenance, so it's constructed by the applicant and maintained by the city.
Right. Yeah, it would generally be like a public access easement.
Sure. And so it won't just be sidewalk, the property owners, it is for anyone in public.
Correct.
And then, is there sidewalk there on South Point that is connected?
No, and unfortunately, I don't think there's room with this project to coordinate that, but there is not right now at this time.
So we have to then essentially connect to the sidewalk on the other side?
Yeah, all those details to be determined.
Okay. And then you talked a little bit about the parking, and can you elaborate a little bit on what was done and discussed through the meetings with the applicant about expanding the parking and the driveway?
Tell me more
Let me ask
specifically.
you this. One of the concerns trying to make sure that there's no one backing out on the area.
Right, that is the concern across the board when we look at development projects, but particularly in this area of Julia. Yes, so the driveways, the applicant went back and ensured to address these safety concerns that there was area to maneuver to avoid rear entry onto Julia.
So they've got the attached garages, but also an expanded parking pad in the back, parts to address that.
That's correct.
And so there's a front exit to Julia and then back.
Yeah, they're designed for that to happen.
Okay. Does council have any questions for Ms. Lofton?
I've got just a couple.
Okay. Y'all, ladies first.
Oh,
okay. Would sidewalk be required on South Point Road?
Right now, the applicant is voluntarily constructing the sidewalk.
All right. You mentioned tree save. That is basically a cleared lot. Where are the trees, unless you're looking at a buffer that I talk about the tree save?
There is about 7 trees, if I recall correctly, but there are existing trees. And those trees count for a certain number of area. And if they are removed, they are required to replant that area.
Okay.
So it is
So that's
important.
minimal, 7 trees.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure about that. We also have talked at length about that we would like a turn lane at Julia Avenue. So when we're looking at this, I would not want sidewalk to be built and then us require an easement and then have to tear out sidewalk and move and all that kind of thing. So talk about how that would happen.
There's different options, but with this current proposal, as it is right now, the sidewalk is as far back away from the edge of the right of way or edge of the pavement, but there is room if we look and see that there is additional right of way required. The setbacks of the houses as they are proposed would allow additional right-of-way to be dedicated if that were necessary, and have the house still meet the required minimum setback.
All right, so can we require that when you do the technical part of this, or where would that be in the process?
I think that it's my opinion that generally we require from development enough to offset their impact. And I think that it would exceed our authority to require it. What we might be more successful at is to work with the applicant to plan, like the city engineer, to identify the needed right-of-way widths, design, and work with the applicant to get the dedication, but I'm definitely open to ideas and feedback for council.
Yeah, because that's a major concern to me, because I would not want to approve this and then have the landowners or the homeowners find out that this is in the process, and so you're going to have some angry people, and that's not necessary. We need to make sure we look at it from the front end of it. And I'm assuming you would agree with that, Richard.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, that's some really good points. And what we've done is really looked at this side of the road like we haven't in the past. You know, there's a project approved on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
That ship has sailed. what we have is the opportunity now to plan with this project. So we have evaluated that, found that with no changes to the current layout, that if additional right-of-way were necessary, that it would be possible keeping the properties conforming as approved. But yeah, do you have any further thoughts, City Manager, on how we could?
Well, he's not sworn.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, all I can speak to is the fact that we have planned, and it is possible with this current plan to plan for future right-of-way dedication.
Thank you.
Mr.
All
Turner.
right, so that was one of the questions I wanted to ask. Is the TIA that was done on the middle school identified that this was required or a need? The TIA, of course, vanished due to legislative action, but that still does not, the need did not vanish. So we do feel relatively comfortable that in the future, if we can put a left turn lane, that we will be able to put that turn lane in, a dedicated lane, right or left. I can't remember which one it called for.
It called for a left turn lane with 100 feet of storage.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I do think, to Rebecca's point, that we can evaluate that and put, when the plat is, if approved, is created, put language on the plat to that effect.
Okay. Let me ask you, looking at this, I drive Julia a lot, and I wanted to talk to you about the potential for road hazard. You're going to have 5 new residents, 4 driveways opening up on Julia Avenue. The first one within 70 or 80 feet of where you make that turn off of South Point Road. How did you guys look at this and decide that this wasn't going to be a hazard or impact traffic in a negative way?
Yeah, unfortunately, this project did not trigger the threshold for any, for our traffic impact analysis or technical transportation technical memorandum.
I mean, I understand that, but I mean, just as staff looking at it, saying, is this a good idea, knowing the volume that this road carries at peak hours, to have these driveways opening up? And I know that you have the pad to turn around, but, if you've got 4 or 5 cars, the cars in the middle, if someone needs to leave, that pad is going to be useless to them. Somebody's still going to have to back out. Now, when I was looking at this, I wanted to ask you, and I'm no planner, but I was looking at it and I thought of Hawthorne. Had anybody in the planning process considered an alleyway along the back of these houses, turning the garages to face the alleyway? That way people could access the property on an alleyway and not have to impact Julia Road at all. I don't know what I don't know about planning, but I looked at it, I said, I wondered if they had thought about that.
We did, and I will just confirm that we, as staff, did present different concerns and potential ideas, but the applicant has chose to proceed with this plan, and any other details they would have to speak to.
So having access off Greenwood is a viable option, like what Councilman Turner is suggesting?
Right, we didn't fully design any plans, but we did generally look at and feel like an alley was worth pursuing, but that was our feedback, but it was ultimately up to the applicants.
I think from a safety perspective, that would be my number one option.
And they can definitely speak to the details of why that decision was made.
All right, let me ask you, and just for my own, what constitutes substantially similar? When I hear verbiage like that, I've got to ask you, who decides? Do you guys have a mutually agreed upon benchmark or matrix to determine or satisfy substantial similarity? When you're looking at it, that you both are coming and arriving at the same point. I mean, who makes that call? Do we make that okay, that's substantially similar? But how do we decide that?
Okay, so I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. I was going to pull the pictures up, but you can see that there is homes with porches. There's homes with specific architectural features. So we We'll likely get in plans that are, I mean, these were the plans that were submitted by the builder, developer builder. So they will probably look just like this, maybe vary in color. But we start by looking at the features. So we have the dormers, we have the covered front porch, the width of the house. So we're comparing. If it's all of a sudden, they're saying it's similar to the one on the top, and then they don't have a whole front porch, it's not similar. So we make sure that the architectural features I just mentioned are similar. Down on the bottom left, you see that is similar to some of the other construction in the area. Those
So
also have specific features
You're
that we
looking at
compare
key
to what's
architectural factors.
right. It's almost like a checklist. Is this matched? You know, we're comparing things that match. If they don't, are they a suitable alternative? You know, if it's not a dormer, but it's another architectural feature that adds depth and interest.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, the big thing too is the materials, you know, just being very specific on those. And then, you know, whether it's Tudor or Craftsman style, then we compare the features that's submitted.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Does this also incorporate the lot size as comparable to what other homes are around there? So when I'm just looking at GIS, I'm trying to understand. So you're pulling in the architecture side of it, of what's comparable, but does that also branch out to the property sizes that surround that current area for the proposed development?
Right now, the analysis is limited to lot width and setbacks. So it is not looking at the total square footage of lots or acreage.
The only reason why I was making that kind of comparison there, because again, as I'm reading the bullet point B here, you look behind there and you have an acre, 0.64, 0.38, across the street an acre, over here half an acre. So if we're talking about comparable to what's already there to complement it, we're talking, I'm just looking at the property sizes are a lot smaller than what is comparable around there, if that makes sense.
Right. There are some single-family homes on larger lots. There's also some adjacent undeveloped parcels that skew that. If I'm not mistaken, Julia Avenue was developed without city sewer originally, so they would have larger lot sizes on some part. And that idea then is to blend with the transition to the smaller lots in commercial areas. So.
You testified earlier regarding known traffic and safety concerns in the area. Can you elaborate?
Actually, that wording was specifically about the comments that we hear, not any specific citable safety factors, or I just...
Well, but you testified that as a result of those concerns, you did, in your discussions, get the developer to shift one driveway to front onto Greenwood instead of Julia, so you must have had something in mind to ask them to do that.
We hear that that's heavily traveled, that it can back up. So I think that the traffic concerns about volume on Julia, and then as Mr. Councilman Turner mentioned, South Point Road has different concerns that exist.
And you also said that the driveways were designed for a front exit with a wider driveway in the rear pad in the back. Does that necessarily mean just because they're designed for that that will be what is done in practice?
Right, we cannot guarantee that. We can
Yes.
only design it the best that we can.
All right, thank you.
I've got one. I know you mentioned that this didn't trigger the technical review process for the TIA. Did you do any analysis of the traffic patterns or look at things like stopping distance between that intersection and the first driveway there?
Right, yes. What it does point out is that we don't have any fixed numbers in this particular situation. So we work to keep the driveway as far away from the intersection as possible. For collector roads, we have separation requirements for driveways. So that's helpful. But specifically, we did look more on the Julia side since that's where the access would be from. And just provided our feedback, and the applicant has submitted their request for consideration.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions?
There's one more thing I just want to be more specific on, back to Councilman Stowe's question about the future right-of-way. And I wanted to be specific about what we have analyzed and what we've looked at. And we have found that a dedication of 10 additional feet along Julia, that 10 additional feet is the specific amount that could be dedicated based on our analysis, staff analysis, without impacting the current site plan and setbacks.
Okay, any other questions by the panel?
Great, thank you.
Mr. Russell?
Good evening. What I'd like to do is just call a couple witnesses.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if I can, just sort of, I'm going to have call up Cameron Kennedy, who's the applicant, and then Kevin Brown, who is working with us as a general contractor and builder. I know that council knows a lot of the infill developers that come in front of you and know their work. So let me just take a minute and introduce these folks and then have them testify in the narrative, if that's all right. So Cameron is he's a Belmont resident. He lives on R.L. Stowe Road in the Laurel Walk neighborhood. He's been here 2 years, been in the Charlotte area for 10. He and his brother have a general contracting company that mainly does amenities. So they work with schools, they work with parks and rec departments, they work with housing developers to do the amenity part of that you might see in an apartment complex or a school playground. One of their recent customers is the Belmont Housing Authority. So they are working to redo and upgrade and upfit the playground on Flowers Court at the Housing Authority. So he's someone that's come here. He's kind of invested in the community, not only personally, but through his business. And the most important thing that I want you to know and I have him talk about is that one of these homes that he intends to build is for his personal use. He's going to move into one of the homes, or that's his intention if this project is approved. So Cameron, this is Cameron Kennedy. Why don't I ask you just sort of in the narrative, talk to the council a little bit about the project, why you selected this place, a little bit about the houses that you want to build, and the site plan.
How's everyone doing this evening? First, I do want to thank the planning committee and everything. Everything's gone really smooth. They've been great. Everything's been going really well. A bunch of different revisions, so it's been a good process. But like he said, I live in Belmont, right on R.L. Stowe. Moved here a couple years ago. Love the area. I've been in the Charlotte area, the whole greater area, for about 10 years now, but been in Belmont recently. And I've always passed the Julia land. Always had my eye on that land. I love that location. Finally was able to, get a hold of that for myself. And like he said, I plan on living on the lot furthest in, corner of Julia and Greenwood. So that'll be for myself. And, we have pride in, the quality that we want to bring for some other really nice families along that piece of land. We want everything will stay very consistent with the other SUP permits that are right there on Willarine and Greenwood. It's going to be very consistent and minimally invasive. So I just appreciate everything and appreciate the consideration for, approval on this project. Let me know if, you have any other questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
To Councilman Turner's point, were you presented with options through this process and discussions with the planning department regarding alley-loaded lots that would exit onto Greenwood Drive?
Yeah, we were presented with that option, or even a combined driveway option. But that makes less sense because you're actually bringing more vehicles closer to that stop sign. So with them spread out, you're actually pushing them further away from that South Point Julia stop sign.
What about the vehicles backing out? Assuming that they were to do that, would that cause some traffic or safety issues? Just somebody trying to turn and somebody backing out.
For sure. Yeah, I know that, like I said, I live there. I totally understand what you're saying, but that's why we put such an emphasis on any concern for this with a very large back pad to be able to easily turn around multiple vehicles. So that was why we did that.
Other questions for
Okay, just for
Mr. Kennedy.
clarification, if you're talking about putting the alley, you would run that into Greenwood, that would push it farther away from the stop sign at South Point and Julia Avenue. So that's not what I gathered from what you said, unless I misunderstood.
So I was referring to the other option that we were presented, which was shared driveways coming out on Julia.
Right?
That was what I was referring to.
Okay. Why not an alleyway? Why did you choose not to do the alley and load it all onto Greenwood?
Well, it's not really consistent with what's been done right there across the street in two separate projects. But we didn't really get into that too detailed. I mean, we kind of wanted to stay consistent with what's already been done.
Well, the difference being on Willow.
Yeah, and another thing it eats up the lot size. It's just a lot different. It's a lot different. It's not consistent. So we didn't really.
Well, it's not consistent in design, but you also have to take into account Willow-Reen is not a main artery. So those cars exiting onto Willow-Reen, I mean, it's a whole different animal than backing out onto on Julia.
And specifically backing out within a block of South Point Road.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were also looking. I mean, by right, cars could do that as well. By right, because the driveway would be right there, and that's by right.
But you wouldn't have 4 driveways coming out onto Julia by right.
Well, I mean, with 3 duplexes by right, that's even more people coming out.
But then that's only 3 driveways.
But it would be more people because they're duplexes.
Well, I'm worried about the people coming out of the driveways, and then you got the traffic coming off South Point onto Julia. So,
There can be more than one car for each. If regardless of whether you build by right or you've got 5 lots, but you would stipulate, would you not, that there can be more than one car for each of those 5 houses in each driveway?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't gotten into that. We just thought this was the most appealing and also consistent with the local area, what's been done. So, and it's going to be. I really don't think it'll be invasive at all. Like I said, I'm going to live there. I think, according to what's already been done, or everything that's already been done over there, it's about the same thing.
And what do you mean by invasive?
Invasively dense. I don't think it will be. And we're just planning on bringing a nice quality product.
You got a question?
I do.
Sure.
What kind of buffer I see right here are you guys proposing on South Point Road all the way up to that corner where Julia Avenue meets South Point Road? So lot number 1.
Yeah. So there's 7 trees, like you were told, currently on there, and we were told that we could replace the tree coverage, the ones that are coming down. We could replace that, anywhere on the land. So we kind of thought that would make the most sense to load them as a nice little barrier from South Point to, that first home. That was the idea.
Could that not potentially be problematic there if you make a turn off of Julia Avenue from South Point Road as a blind spot? Again, kind of reiterating to the traffic issues that could happen from that. Because if I'm backing out of that lot number 1, and then a car is coming off South Point Road and swinging down Avenue or Julia Avenue, that could be problematic.
I can speak to that.
Yeah, so you do see that.
We have evaluated that based on 2 different size site triangles and found that to not be in site triangle or a future concern as far as site. Part of that is because the pavement width is narrow and there's a lot larger right-of-way. So there's plenty of room of unpaved right-of-way to allow for safe site distance at that location. I have not only evaluated it on paper, but I went out there personally and looked at it as well.
I think there's 72-foot frontage on them.
They're all 72 foot. So.
Any other questions for this witness?
Let me just revisit something. We've got a sampling of 28 lots. Now, I guess you throw out the high and the low because you have some that are kind of larger than the others. But Melissa, that gave us when you throw out the high one, that gave you an average, was it of 120 feet? Sorry. I thought I saw that, but I just couldn't recall. Because I think when we talked before, we were throwing out the outlier if there was one that was just really huge.
There were a couple there.
Right. The straight number average is 120 feet within the 300 feet area. If you remove some major outliers but keep properties that make sense, it goes down to 110 feet. When we start looking at outliers, we try to look at undeveloped properties, non-residential properties, and remove those, but keep the larger single-family properties that are in the area. So without removing some of those larger properties, the lowest the average would be is 110 feet. By removing some larger outliers, because we did this all sorts of analysis, it only gets down to like 99 feet.
Okay, but with the outliers included, it was 175 feet, is that right?
For the block.
Block width, okay.
Yeah, and that's
But that only includes the 2 lots, is that
right. Yeah,
correct?
that's not a very accurate, as it would be accurate in a more developed property or area with more properties. Yep. So, yep, that's the answer.
All right, so either at 120 or 100 or 99, you're kind of referencing those numbers?
Yes, exactly.
All right, so and they're coming in at 72. Okay.
Any other questions?
Any other question, Mr. Kennedy? Sure.
Just some of the questions. As far as the alley, did you do a sort of analysis or evaluation from a financial perspective as to whether, how that would look, how whether it would work, like having an alley run so what were you thinking?
Yeah, well, you know, the area, it's a very important and valuable area to Belmont. It's very sought after. Everyone loves the area, and there's not really any comps to compare to that type of home with an alleyway right there. So it would affect, the numbers of everything, and the value is completely different. So
What's the size or the approximate size or range of size of the square footage of the home?
probably average right around 2,600, 2,700, right around there.
Any other questions for Mr. Kennedy?
Do you have any numbers when you say, well, having an alleyway would affect numbers and everything would be different? Do you have any figures?
Yeah, I do. So I live in Laurel Walk with the alleyway product right there on RL Stowe. And I know the value of my home. It's drastically different than a project that someone just did on Greenwood with the 4 homes and the personal driveway to their detached garage. It's a drastically different number.
Which is?
I mean, someone just sold one of my homes where I live right on RL Stowe for $510, and the ones over there on Greenwood just sold for about $680 or $700, and that's comparing those 2 different types of projects that you're saying.
Other questions from Mr. Kennedy? You can step down, sir.
If it's okay with the council, I have a little bit of additional staff analysis feedback regarding the alley. The reason we didn't push it any further after our initial discussion, there's a few reasons. First, we are looking at the width of Julia, and if we were to require an alley, it would push the homes closer to the front of the lot, and we determined that that was not ideal for a road that we are looking to widen in the future. Another big component is trash service and the large vehicles, and the design width is such that a turnaround did not seem like that would work. So that's there's a couple considerations that we look at for the long-term benefit of our residents, and that's those were a couple things that did not warrant us pursuing that design. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Russell, you want to question Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I just want to introduce Kevin Brown. So Kevin's a former resident of Gaston County. He was a member of the Gaston County JCs when he was here. He lives in Charlotte now. He's been in home building for 15 years, and so he is kind of the technical or the expertise side of this project and of the project team. He's just finished up a couple infill projects here in Belmont, one on Cedar Street and one on East Avenue. So I wanted him to be able to tell you all a little bit about that. And he's done a lot of infill work both here and in Charlotte. So one of the things that he brings to the project is just some expertise, some inspiration in looking around town where infill's been successful and why he thinks that will work here. So the other thing that I wanted to do, Mr. Wilson, is Kevin has prepared a letter on valuation. One of the things that, as you know, we have to show is that the project and the use if developed or proposed will not materially injure the value of adjoining properties. So if I can,
You want to pass those out?
I
Is
would
that what
like
you want?
to
Yes,
draw
go ahead.
copies for everybody. And we would move that this letter be made part of the record.
Okay, part of the record. Thank you. Thank you.
So, and he'll be happy to take any questions about the letter and the valuation as well. Kevin, can you talk a little bit about the project and the construction?
Yeah, it was important for us to have these discussions. I want to take my hat off to planning staff. They've been a pleasure to work with. I mean, not always a pleasure because we're going through several different site plans, but we initially submitted to where we are now, so it's come a long way. And the alleyway has come up several times, so if I can put that to bed, potentially anything over 150 feet by fire code would have to have a turnaround. So putting a turnaround in there would additionally devalue these lots. The paper I'm passing around and what Cameron said as well, the values of the homes would be negatively impacted, such that then I would have to rework a letter saying that they could potentially bring down the price of neighboring homes. And additionally, bringing an alleyway in, like there's responsibility for that. Who's going to maintain that road? Can fire trucks get back there? Can public services get back there for trash? So it looks good on the front end to talk about it. When we dive into it more, as we did with planning staff, there's a lot of negatives that come out of it as well. The other thing I want to talk about is we could have come in by right and put 6 duets or duplexes in. We thought it'd be more responsible to do something that ties in with the rest of the neighborhood. And 6 duets, there's a lot of talk about, well, does the driveway work with a turnaround or not a turnaround? 6 duets, I wouldn't have to put any turnaround at all. I could have front-facing driveways or front-facing garages. So we've been responsible in the fact that we've detached garages, which is a considerable expense for any of you that have been in the building process. It's not any cheaper to build another unit. I'm basically building 2 homes at that point when I'm doing a detached garage. So it's not by choice, but it does add the aspect that we can bring cars in, turn around, and then come back out, heads up. And last thing, the infill projects I have done, which are in, I'd call it a similar area, all the infill lots I've done are 50 feet. So these are 72 feet. And I know there's been talk that we're comparing these to some of these estate homes that didn't have sewer when they were built, and they're still an acre or 2 acre lots. I mean, if you go to New York City and look at Central Park and then look at a block over, I mean, Central Park's going to certainly skew what the lot sizes are a block away. Not that that's the same here, but you get my point. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I'll just say, with the alleyway, you say the fire truck might not be able to make it down there, and that may be true, but I doubt they would choose that route if they've got the choice of either South Point Road or Julia to fight a fire on those premises. I don't think the alleyway would come into play. I mean, given the choice, they're not going to choose the alleyway.
Well, it's 150 feet. It's just it's a fire code.
Let me ask you, I mean, and, not to get hung up on it, but you're talking about a turnaround, I guess somewhere around here for a garbage truck? Is that what you're saying?
Well, fire code would require anything over 150 feet would require a turnaround.
Okay. Instead of making something turn around, if you've got an alley cut here, and I don't know the answer to this, why wouldn't you just open it up on the Julia, or does that change the dynamic? Does that then become a road?
You mean South Point?
South Point, yeah, I'm sorry.
I don't think DOT is going to go for that. There's no way DOT is going to allow
Okay,
that.
well, like I said, I mean, I didn't know. It just seems like that might.
I agree, but DOT would shut that down.
Okay.
Other questions for Mr. Brown? Okay, gentlemen. Yes, okay.
So one of the things when we were talking a little bit about the value, the economic value of the places, part of what's going into this in terms of the cost is going to be the infrastructure for the water line coming in, is that right?
Yeah.
As well as the sidewalk, all that.
Yeah. Viability of the project, it works for us, but traditionally we don't have to extend, especially in a downtown setting. It's unusual to have to extend water services to a property like this, but we're happy to do it. We're happy to be team players with the city, but yeah, we do have to invest a considerable amount of money to extend water from the city where it dies off and bring it into this parcel. So we're happy to do that, but it is a considerable expense, as are sidewalks. And we're happy to do that because it's just going to add walkability. And I think that's another safety feature for the area. There's no sidewalks going down Julia, so I think it's great to have that walkability coming into downtown.
That leads to one more question. I think this is for staff. I don't know that it had ever been identified which side of Julia we would put the sidewalk on. If we go ahead with this and you're talking about tying it in, does that more or less marry us to that side of the road? And is there any reason the engineer might prefer the other side of the road?
I will say that we are absolutely not committed to anything in the future by this, but this is just our opportunity right now to do what we can, if approved, to line up for something that could happen in the future.
Okay.
That's all.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember if there was a preference, because I know it's on the CIP. Couldn't remember it was stated which side of the road was going to be on.
Yeah, not that I know of yet at this point.
Okay.
Any other questions for these witnesses?
No.
Gentlemen, you can step down, and Ms. Crosby?
Thank you for just a moment. Out of respect for the board's time, seeing that I can't give an opinion tonight, I won't. I will simply state the fact that my name is Beth Crosby. I live at 520 Julia Avenue. I've lived in Belmont for 21 years and lived on Julia Avenue for 17 of those years. I love my city, and I love my street, and I love my town. And I would like to consider with the board, if this were to go through tonight, I would love to be a part of a group of people, a focus group, to meet with the people that work with this to build a better Julia Avenue. Because this is a really difficult decision that I believe you're facing tonight. Thank you.
Hold on. Any questions? Any questions from the panel, Ms. Crosby? Thank you, Ms. Crosby. Mr. King?
Evening. I'll be quick too here. Just wanted to say, my name's Cody. I've been a Belmont resident now for 2 years. Been fortunate to see a lot of the growth that Belmont's experienced over those 2 years. And I've loved sharing my house and the town with my family and friends that have visited. And I've been proud to show them Belmont because I think it's an awesome town. I come from a small town too. With that said, I'm in favor of the project because I believe these homes are going to be a quality custom home. and not so much of the tract style that we're starting to see all over Charlotte and all over the other suburbs. I think these are going to be a quality product and allow people to be proud of their home. I'm seeing on local Facebook pages and now heard here tonight, some members of our community are concerned with this style of project and specifically have concerns related to the traffic and safety of the roads and the walkways, which I think is valid, but I just don't think it's this project is the one that we're worried about. My opinion, I think it's more so the big development where we're, approving hundreds of lots at a time, and they're all using the same infrastructure, right? So with that said, I just think these are the style of projects that should continue to go through, so we can make Belmont nicer and create a new home for people and give them an opportunity to come enjoy the town.
Thank you, Mr. King. Any questions for Mr. King? Any questions for Mr. King?
No.
Panel? Thank you. Any kind of closing remarks, Mr. Russell?
First of all, thank you all for your attention and reviewing this with us tonight. I know these processes are a little longer. I appreciate your patience while we work through those. The evidentiary ones are. What I'd say to you in closing is that I think this project in particular is an example of good planning and good planning work by your planning staff of taking a project from the beginning, working through several site plans to be able to come to you with really what's the best possible one or what's the most workable solution that you have for a particular area. I think that happened here. You've heard a little bit about the discussion that led to enlarging the turn lanes, some consideration of doing what both the applicant could as well as planning staff could to try to make sure as best you can that you have plenty of space to turn around, that you're not going to have backing out onto Julia, that you're moving the driveways, the individual driveways, as far as you can from the South Point Road. I do think economics is a factor. It's not the only factor when you look at home building and when you look at a growth process, but there's no question that the cost of real estate is high. Building costs are high because of the pandemic. Labor costs are high. And so, the applicant in this case has taken on some additional work that's beneficial to the community as far as bringing in infrastructure, bringing in sidewalks, and that adds to cost. They've said they're happy to do that. But then when you do the analysis of some of the things such as shared driveways or alleys, that at some point the project doesn't become viable anymore, and that's sort of what part of the presentation to you all. The only other thing that I wanted to make a point of in part of our closing is just in general the benefits of infill development and why that's been good for Belmont, why that's been good for the community. Belmont's been fortunate, I would say, over the past 5-10 years, maybe going back further, to have sort of pockets of infill development where your local builders, where people that want to do one or two homes or a smaller subdivision have been able to add to our housing stock and have been able to do that in ways that are creative, that look different. They use really nice materials so that when you walk through town or you drive through town, there's interesting housing to look at. But most importantly, it provides opportunities for people like Cameron who want to come here because they have friends here, want to live here, want to invest their business in the community, want to be part of the community. It provides some housing opportunities. There's a need still for good housing, places for people to raise their families, people to be part of the community, develop businesses, to be part of the volunteer work or be part of the fabric of the community. So it's good housing. It's not tearing down or replacing some of our traditional or existing homes or structures, but it adds to it. This is consistent with what you all have, what you're being presented with, what you all have improved as recently as 3 years ago in terms of what infill is like. And I would contend to you and point out that some of what Cameron and Kevin are doing is inspired by what's been approved on Willarine and Greenwood already, as well as Julia. Julia's had other further down subdivision and infill development. So I'd ask you to approve it. I think this is the right project for the right place. As Melissa testified, it's consistent with your comprehensive future land use plan where you have slightly smaller lots closer to the city center areas, expanding to the larger lots that you might see further down Julia. So I think it's consistent with that. It's a product of good planning and good collaboration between the building community, the applicant, and the staff. And it will provide some needed opportunities for housing for people that either live here now or want to come to the community. So thank you again for hearing us. It's nice to be back and to see you all and appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
Can we ask questions?
Yes.
Before I ask, I have a question for city attorney. We say the burden is on the applicant.
Yes.
What is the burden? Is it preponderance of the evidence? Okay. Mr. Russell, I have a question for you. There are 3 findings that we have to make, and since you are representing the applicant who has the burden of establishing them, I specifically would like your arguments and evidence as to the 3rd finding: the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety. We've had a lot of discussion about safety and the driveways fronting on Julia. With the knowledge that you have the burden, I'm just really struggling with that. So tell me why you think you've met your burden as to that factor and the public health or safety.
Thank you for the question. If it's all right with you, Mr. Heffernan, let me just quickly run through the first 2 because I'm sort of taking your question that you're relatively comfortable with that. But since this is
and I can only speak for myself, but yes.
Evidentiary record. The first one we've got to show is that the use meets all the required principles and specifications of the code and land use plans. I would contend that's essentially agreed to by the city. It's general residential, stayed general residential. There's no rezoning, and it's consistent with your future comprehensive land use plan. So you've got a lot of evidence as to the first requirement. The second requirement is that the proposed use, if developed according to the plan, will be visually and functionally compatible to the surrounding area. So there's some good questions about that, including, do you consider lot size as well as building materials and looking at that? And I would contend the answer is yes, you consider all of that, but it doesn't have to be exactly the same. We're not necessarily looking for home building or development that's uniform or identical, but something that the criteria is visually and functionally compatible. That does it fit in? And so you're using building materials that are similar to what's been approved at Willerine and Greenwood. They're similar to what's in the existing home building, brick and stone, things that have been there for 20, 30, 40 years. Not exactly the same, but it's compatible. The styles change, the tastes change over time, but it blends well together. And again, so the lot size, what you're looking at there, I would contend, is not, are the lots identical in shape or size, but does the house fit similarly to the lot? Is it scaled such that the houses are too big for the lot? You might find that is not compatible, but here you have roughly 2,600 square feet on close to a quarter of an acre. You're not in a situation where the houses are overwhelming the size of the lot. You've got a tree save that kind of fits in a little bit with Julia. It's not a lot of trees, but it's some, and they're planting some there. You have some trees that have to go in by the code in the front, and then you've got a buffer area. So I think the second one is met. The third question, sort of 2 parts. You've got the letter that addresses will not materially injure or substantially injure the value of adjoining property, so they've studied that. So really then the question is, will the use materially endanger public health or safety? So the question is materially endanger. I don't think that there's any findings. There's nothing in the record that says that the addition of 4 houses is going to add anything about, you're not going to require additional police officers. You're not going to require additional traffic signals or turns. So the question is there evidence that says that it will materially endanger health and safety? And I don't think that's the case. I think the use is, to kind of use one of the words that was used during the hearing, is not intensive. not that intensive.
I believe it was invasive, but
Could have been invasive. I thought I heard intensive, but I think that the concept, though, is the same thing, right? Is that whether it's invasive or intensive, is you're not bringing a high-density development to this particular area. You're bringing 5 lots, which is relatively consistent with what else has been new in the area. Those lots have adequate protections to prevent people from backing out onto Julia. The driveways have been pushed as far as you can in each respective lot away from South Point Road. So that is, those are important limitations to concerns about health and safety. You have sidewalks that's been added to the street, which doesn't exist now. So you're taking, if to the extent that you do have pedestrian traffic, you're taking it off taking that off the street and putting it onto sidewalks. So, Mr. Heffron, I would contend there is evidence in the record that you can find that there are improvements to health and safety and that the development takes into account potential adverse impact of the development and addresses it with specific planned items, such as how the parking is going to look, the fact that you have additional detached garages, there's no need for on-street parking. There's some, in the materials that you have, there was a possibility of discussion with the post office that you may have a kiosk on this that would take some of the stop and go traffic away from the front edge of this development. So all that is evidence before you, and I think, as you said, it's not required to prove substantial certainty or beyond a reasonable doubt. It's preponderance of the evidence, and there's specific planning factors before you that you.
Can I ask you a follow-up?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think when you opened up, you said there was nothing in the record that would indicate that there would be a hazard by doing this. But let me ask you, and the fact that planning and zoning had put forth to the developer alley-loaded lots would suggest to me that they had some concerns about safety on Julia. You know, that was their testimony that they did suggest that, so that would be part of the record, would it not?
I think, yeah, the fact that there was some discussion about how would alley-loaded lots look and what would that, the pros and cons of that as a planning tool.
Well, I'm supposing here, but I can't imagine that the suggestion was driven by aesthetics at this location. That's my interpretation. The fact that they suggested it to me suggests there were some concerns about traffic and maybe trying to steer them in a direction, slightly different direction because of those concerns. So, I mean, that's just what I'm saying. I think there is something in the record that speaks to that.
Great. So I think, Mr. Turner, it really comes down to kind of a weighing of, does the addition of really 2 homes, right? Because you have 3 by right homes here, and the applicant is asking for 2 additional. So does the addition of 2 homes create enough additional, if traffic is the concern, traffic or pedestrian or mowing the lawn or what have you, does that add enough to say there is now a material evidence of a potential injury to health or safety? And if so, if in your judgment as council people and judges in this case, if it does, is that offset by the specific planning efforts that the applicants made here, such as we're going to widen the driveway, we're going to add additional parking in the back, turnaround, we're going to add detached garages, we're going to move the driveways instead of center cut or left cut all the way over to the western side. And so ultimately, some of this there's a little bit of a subjective criteria, and we have to go with evidence, but there is a leap of faith that you have to make as to, are the efforts that the applicant is making to address these subjective concerns or perceived concerns, are those enough to offset it? And I would say in this case, they are. To come back to the question of, do you have a material concern by the addition of 2 lots but the applicant's gone to these lengths to address those.
All right, anybody else? Questions for Mr. Russell? Thank you, Mr. Russell.
I have a question for you, Park.
Yes.
Because I know it's different in the quasi-judicial than legislative. Are we allowed, in considering our decision, to weigh what would be allowed on this property by right vis-a-vis what they're doing, what they're proposing to do, and to take that into consideration?
I think so.
Okay.
I needed, if that's the end of the public hearing, we need a motion to come out of public hearing.
I'll make a motion, we come out of public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move to the next item, which is consider this approval or not on this item, this application. And I'll remind you that we're going to go one by one of each of the three findings and vote up or down, whether you're for or against. You think the burden has been met by the applicant, and if you feel like this finding, the burden has been met, you'd vote for it. If you don't, vote opposed, you vote against it. And all three findings are required. Ready? On the first finding, the use meets all required principles and specifications of the code, LDC, and any adopted land use plans. All in favor of that, raise your hand. I see 5. B, the proposed plan, if developed according to the plan submitted and approved, will be visually and functionally compatible to the surrounding area. All in favor of that finding, raise your hand. One, I see 4. C, the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety and will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property if located where proposed. All in favor? I see 2. That finding would not be met and the application would not be approved. It would be denied. Okay, that's a lot of work, but and time, but that application fails. Okay, Mayor, it's back in.
Can we take like a quick?
You want a quick break?
Okay.
the consideration of the approval of an additional agreement for the right-of-way and utility easement acquisition for Del Webb development.
Thank you, Mayor. And before we get into this item, you had a special meeting at 5:45 to interview Jennifer Simmons for the Historic Preservation Advisory Board, and she got delayed as she was coming down from the mountains. She is here now. Do you mind interviewing her during other business tonight so that she can do that?
Sure. Yeah.
And as long as it's minimal, because at the rate we're going, this is going to be a long meeting.
Well, that's up to the council.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer, are you able to? Okay. So remember, when we get to other business,
somebody remember,
because I'm going to forget.
Well, I'll just look out in the audience and see her, and that'll.
You should be the only one left.
Yeah, that's true.
Jennifer Simmons, right?
Thank you. So the next item is a discussion item on easement acquisition, right-of-way acquisition for off-site improvements associated with the Del Webb project that you approved through a conditional rezoning, I believe, in May of last year. And as you'll recall, one of the conditions is that the Pulte Group, who's the developer of the Del Webb project, which is also known as Carolina Riverside now, was required to make some off-site roadway improvements in coordination with the transportation impact analysis recommendations that would require, in some cases, some additional right-of-way to be acquired by the developer. It also required that water and sewer services be brought to the site in order for the project to be developed. I'm not sure that Councilman Zooks has seen this map yet, but I know the other council members have. This is our, I think, 2007 utility plan for the Peninsula, showing how the major undeveloped properties on the South Point Peninsula will be served by water and sewer. I highlight the blue area is what we used to call the Pittenger property, then the Center Street Partners, South Street Partners property. It's also known as Belmont number 1, Belmont number 2, Belmont number 3. This is the South Fork Small Area plan properties. And our plan since at least 2007 has been that water and sewer service will serve this overall 1,000 acres, 1,100 acres, through the property that is now the Belmont Middle School. And you'll recall a couple years ago, we partnered with Gaston County Schools to bring water and sewer to this site, through the middle school site, for this future development of the 1,000 acres. And so the plan is to have water main and sewer force main go through what is now the Belmont Middle School property west to the larger property, and then go north and south, and be served by a series of pump stations. So I give you that as background. The reason that the Pulte Group has requested to come before you tonight is that they have been working with Gaston County Schools on getting the utility easements all the way back, because if you remember, the middle school is only on the front part of this county school property. So getting utility easements all the way across the Gaston County Schools property, that's being worked out. Should not be any problem. The sewer line and water line, or force main and water main, will then need to go from the Gaston County Schools property across what is called Belmont number 2, which is part of the overall Pittenger or South Fork Small Area Plan property that is not part of the Del Webb project, that has not been rezoned, that would be a future development. So sort of a third-party group. So we need to get across that group or that property to then go to serve the Pulte Group's property that they have under contract. So similar to the discussions that you've had in the last year about having to acquire property or permission from third-party private property owners to meet some standards, just like you would with a transportation improvement and roadway right-of-way. That's a negotiation between the private developer and whoever owns that property that needs to be acquired for intersection improvement or road widening, for example. In this case, and there was a specific condition of approval in the rezoning that I've included in your agenda packets that addresses the process by which the developer, PulteGroup, would go through if they're unsuccessful in acquiring transportation right-of-way from a third party. The rezoning ordinance is silent on what would happen on the utility easements. So this is the major utility easement needed to bring water and sewer to the site, needing to get the easements from Gaston County Schools and from the Belmont 2 property to serve Belmont number 1, which is the PulteGroup's property. We require the water main to be a loop system, and so they're also having to build a water main on Armstrong Ford Road, hopefully within the existing NCDOT right-of-way, but in some cases there may not be sufficient NCDOT right-of-way, so there may be some smaller lots fronting Armstrong Ford Road that would need to provide easements for the water main. So I give you all that as background. PulteGroup is represented here with Fred Matrulli and Bridget Grant, who's not with PulteGroup, but has helped them through this rezoning process. They're here to give you some information about some assistance that they would like to see the city consider providing to them on the utility side, similar to what's been granted to them on the transportation side through that rezoning ordinance. So I'd ask Fred and Bridget to come up and speak to you about the request.
Good evening. How's everybody doing? I'm Fred Matrulli. I'm with PulteGroup. We have been since May when we got approved, have been very diligently under design of the first phase of Carolina Riverside. That's the marketing for the project now. And in about the September, October timeframe, that's when we had all the information we needed to go out and pursue the easements required for both utilities and traffic improvement. We've had so far on phase 1, which is, as Adrian mentioned, an offsite water line, and then offsite water and sewer lines going through Belmont 2 and the Gaston County Schools. All of the owners have been contacted, and we've had many conversations back. We feel fairly comfortable about the easements we need on Armstrong Ford Road. Those conversations continue. Where we've hit a stalemate is really with Belmont 2. And we cannot, at least up until now, come to an agreement with them. So with, as you know, for the phase 1 to commence, so we can, close on the property and actually get the project started, we're going to need those utility easements. We're going to continue to pursue those. But what we're asking is for help if we hit a roadblock with any particular seller. So we would ask that Belmont commit to help us acquire whichever easements we're not able to acquire. As it relates to the phase 2 easements, those are all traffic improvement. And the 2 intersections that we've been working on is Julia and Armstrong Ford Road. That one has some very complex things surrounding it. That actually has a Duke transmission line over the top of the intersection, and Duke is not letting us go near anything, and it's providing a big challenge. So that the likelihood of us being able to come to a solution there is very challenged at this point. And then the second offsite intersection is up at the South Main and the church property. We've talked to the church. They formed a committee internally, and so we continue the conversations with them. I think ultimately we would be able to work something out there. In review of that intersection, there's a drainage issue there, so NCDOT has requested us to investigate running stormwater pipe from the intersection down to Poplar Street. Is street or avenue? Street. And so those 2 offsite intersections are going to take a long time, and we're committed to get them done. So our proposal there to you would be we'll as soon as we close on the property, we'll post a bond for all those improvements. And in return, we would ask that we wouldn't get held up on COs if we were not able to make them happen. So if we were not, we would either probably pull the bond and then provide a payment in lieu that the city can determine what where they would invest that money, or, we'd figure that out. So that's really where we're at. We're anxious to get going. I think from a corporate perspective, our folks, they don't close on properties without the confidence that we're going to have a deal. So we would really need to know if we were going to agree with Belmont and if needed, gain your assistance in acquiring the property.
What do you mean by, can you be more specific in gaining our assistance in acquiring the properties? I mean, are you talking about eminent domain?
Yes.
Hmm.
So in other municipalities, we've done it where it's, you go through the process, you prove your good faith efforts, you record every conversation and attempt to contact folks. Ultimately, when you know you're not going to get it done, we would get an appraisal for the property and turn that over to the city and request that help. And from that point, it goes into the city's, responsibility to attempt to acquire, but the bill is obviously on us as the developer.
So if you cannot reach an agreement with these property owners, then your fallback position, assistance from the city, would be eminent domain. If the city is not interested in pursuing eminent domain, then the fallback position from that would be cash in lieu. So let me ask you, when I'm thinking about that, does that not make your issue our issue? I mean, you write us a check, but the issue still remains.
You essentially look for alternative methods and means. And one of the ways when I've worked in other municipalities and the municipality has gotten involved, it's typically when the municipality is willing to engage at some point. The property owners are more likely to work with the developer because the developer will pay more than the appraisal price in some cases, and the municipalities won't. And so it sort of incentivizes the property owners to continue to work with developers to get a better price at the end of the day for it. When it comes down to, I think the second part of your question was it's a joint effort. I think when we're trying to develop a site that's consistent with the adopted land use policy, that's consistent with the vision, that's consistent with implementing the roadway and infrastructure projects, it's looking at it as a partnership. How do we get this move it forward?
Can I ask you this follow-up question? And I'm going to preface this by saying I don't know what I don't know. But before I buy a property or a house, particularly a house, I've got to exercise due diligence. I bring in a guy to look all over the house and tell me what the issues are. When you look at this property, right out of the gate, were you not aware or made aware that you are bounded here, you're bounded there, this is going to be required? This came up kind of late in the game.
Well, you need the information in order to determine what and where the easements are actually going to be. You can't nail those down until you've gone through the entire design of the project, which we did from the moment we got approved at the zoning to, in September. So it wasn't until September where we can actually put pencil to paper and say, all right, this is exactly where the easement is going. This is exactly how much we're asking for. And that's when all the conversations started. And so the conversations have continued since then. And I get that question asked by our superiors all the time. Why didn't you go out there earlier? Well, you can go out and shake hands and greet yourself, but you don't know what you have to ask for. So that's the tricky part, and it takes a long time. So hopefully that answers your question.
So what particular, so there's two issues here, it seems like. With the utility easements, my understanding at least, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the only easement you need to acquire is through the lower half of whatever, or the lower 2/3.
We have water line easements on Armstrong Ford Road. Mm-hmm. That's 7 properties.
Right.
And we've actually obtained several of those already.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Belmont 2 for water and sewer, and the Gaston County School for water and sewer, which, as Adrian said, that one, I think it sounds like we're too.
I had understood the memo that we had here that your preferred method was actually payment in lieu as opposed to eminent domain, and now I understood you here today to say it would be eminent domain and then payment in lieu.
Well, on the payment in lieu on the traffic impacts, right?
Mhm.
Because that's feasible. On
Mhm.
utility easements, if we don't have those in place, then that prevents us from closing on the property. That's actually commencing on it. So that's the difference.
Well, just speaking for myself, I mean, I'm always very reticent to use eminent domain. Now, for a highway, something like that, where you can make the case that it's for a very large public good and use, I might reluctantly look at that. It's hard to make that case here because you want us to use eminent domain to aid a private development. And it's hard for me, I mean, I'm still trying to process that, does that comply with the greater good or not? And I'm not sure where I land on that, but that's a very touchy ask.
Would bringing that sewer line through Belmont number 2 allow, would any other development occurring on the Pittenger property utilize that connection, or would it just be this project?
So it would be, yes, so Fred's project is on a little over a third of the overall, I'm just going to call it the Pittenger property, because I'm old, and that's what we call it forever. The other lower two-thirds would be served by this water main and sewer force main. So it has been designed to serve the entire 1,100 acres. Unfortunately, Fred's the first one in, so he's got to do all the heavy lifting for it.
Right.
But Jerry, I'm not sure if that sewer main is also sized so that it could serve the back half of the Belmont Middle School property. If the county schools were interested in building, at one point they were talking about building an elementary school on the back half of that campus.
The water main. The enforcement, the only other thing, they're going to provide the primary pump station for the whole thing. Pump to the enforcement. The school wants to put a building in the back where the sewer. You can get down to the nurses.
Thank you. I say that to show that this is not serving just the Pulte Group's property or project. It would be serving a regional area.
Okay.
What does that region include? It would include the entire Pittenger property and possibly the addition of another school? That's the entire region?
Yes.
So the entire region would consist of what? The addition of an elementary school and the entire build out?
Blue area, that's not necessarily covered. Other than north of the school, that's all covered by existing pump station. So they're covered. Primarily for the Pittenger property. The lower end of the Pittenger might include some of those unincorporated areas.
All right, well, let me ask. All right, just to clarify a little bit, because I know we have water at the new middle school. If they were to build an elementary school, is a capacity there for them to tap into whatever lines the middle school is using and have sufficient water?
Well, yeah.
Okay, so while the addition of this main might serve a new elementary school, we currently have capacity to service it.
I would say that's not the issue. The whole point of it is you want to develop circulation systems. That's why they get Armstrong Road. So that if you have a water main break at the main, you have to close it down.
So what exactly are we being, because we've had this discussion, I don't see an agreement to approve. I see a request for an agreement. And so my question would be, there's two aspects to this. I mean, the one is to treat the utility easements like we do in the development standards for the transportation easements, which that seems fine. The two is the future transportation easements, which isn't that already addressed in what we have? So what do we need to do with respect to that?
So what we're asking for tonight is direction from the council as to whether or not you're interested in assisting the Pulte Group in the event they're unsuccessful in acquiring these utility easements, and then potentially future right-of-way on the transportation side. But I believe the utility easement is the more pressing of the two. I feel comfortable that we have enough in the rezoning ordinance that you said that you are willing to consider assisting in the off-site transportation improvements. Now, the details of that, we can work out. And
is it the same thing with the utility? I mean, were the details still, if we were agreeable to this, does that mean we're now committed to use eminent domain?
I would say that if what we're asking for tonight is direction from you, are you willing to help as kind of a backstop if their negotiations are unsuccessful? And if so, then we would ask Fred and his team to come back to draft an agreement to come back with you. And if there are certain things that you want to include in that, or if there are certain things that you say absolutely do not include in that agreement, we would need to know that. So that
define help.
Yeah, the primary ask is eminent domain.
That would be the ultimate. So that would be the final thing. If Fred and his team are unsuccessful in negotiating, then the city could step in and negotiate in explaining why this ultimately needs to happen in order for the whole property to develop. And then if we're still unsuccessful, then eminent domain would be the final thing, which of course would take a separate council action.
Are they not also asking us to pre-approve certificates of occupancy and future plats?
So we don't, make sure I say this correctly, Shelton, we don't approve certificates of occupancy. We only approve the zoning plat and the zoning compliance for the unit. So the Gaston County would do certificates of occupancy. I believe what Fred is requesting is that when they're ready to start development, if they have plats that need to be approved, they don't want to be held up on the plats. And then, of course, ultimately building permits, zoning permits, which would lead to building permits, which will lead to zoning compliance, which will lead to certificates of occupancy.
Let me ask you, right here under request, it says Belmont's commitment to approve all future plats and grant COs. Why is that in there if we can't grant COs?
He probably didn't know that we didn't have that.
Oh, okay, you are too.
That's not an agreement. I had an issue with that. That's like a request to enter into an agreement. Right. We'd obviously have to look at what the ultimate agreement was. That's what confused me all weekend.
Yes.
Ultimately, what we're looking for is just clarity and specifics on the process. If we get to that point, if we get to the point where we can't agree with Belmont 2 won't grant us an easement, and then at that point, if we can't get your help, then the project may go away, and that's, we just want to have, make you all aware of that, because that would mean obviously no South Fork Parkway, and nothing happens, and the utilities don't have regional pump station, water main, all that. So that's kind of where we're at. We just like to have specific clarity on what the process would look like and the timing, if the steps we would need to take.
I mean, if all we need to decide on is a process, I have no objection to that. I don't necessarily want to tie myself to any particular course of action at this point. But I mean, if it sounds like they're asking if they can come to us and ask, for other options in the event that they hit a wall, I don't have a problem with that. I'm not necessarily looking to commit to what I might do to get around that wall. But if that's what you're looking for, I guess that's kind of where I'm at.
I concur.
So yes, sir, that's what we're looking for at this stage. And then if the council's in agreement on that, then you'd give me direction to work with Fred and his team and certainly the city attorney on drafting an agreement that would include options for assistance.
And we'd get to, that would be presented to
would
us.
certainly come back to you for approval, and then any specific actions coming out of that agreement would come back to you. So, we would be starting the process tonight, not ending it.
Well, let me just, I mean, you may not have thought this far out, but what are the other options? I mean, if they will not grant you an easement, they will not grant you an easement. So that throws, that would theoretically, from your approach, throw it back in our lap. We need you to exercise eminent domain to force the issue. I mean, that's the bottom line at the end of the day. If you cannot come to terms, we either exercise that option or we don't. And if we don't, everybody's at a stalemate. I mean, I don't know what future options you're talking about. It's pretty clear where we're headed here.
When it relates to utility.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, just the other two parcels, have you guys been looking at that or been in communication with the GCL MPO? Any discussions about the other two properties?
Which
The other two parcels?
we have not been in discussion.
No, okay.
Well, and then I guess we need to have a consensus of what we want to instruct Adrian to do. I agree with Mark. I'm happy at this point to say, let's, continue the process, draft an agreement, and bring it back to us. As long as, I think none of us really want to be wedded to any particular outcome or avenue, but we'll see where it goes. But I'm happy to do that at this point.
Are you making a motion then?
Does it need a
Is there
motion?
a motion or not?
Well, I would just say my thought process is a little different. I think it's clear where we're heading, and I'm not gonna, it's going to be tough for me to support that mindset.
I'm fine with continuing the process. I think for the transportation part of it, we probably, with this group, myself included, would not do eminent domain. For the other part, I think we would at least, from my standpoint, we would consider it because we're going to have that for that whole piece of property. So whether we decide to do it now without their cooperation or whether we do it with that party's cooperation, we're still, to me, looking at the same setup. So I'm okay with considering continuing the process.
Are you making a motion, Mark?
No, he said we didn't need to make a motion.
How many properties are you saying? So down here where Lower Armstrong Road is, how many properties did you say? I didn't catch that we would potentially, or that you're probably running into issues, I guess, right now.
Well, we're not, on Armstrong Ford Road, like I mentioned, we've made contact with every single owner, and they've engaged in conversations with us. And ultimately, we feel confident that we'll get those done.
Mm-hmm.
We've come to at least verbal agreement with the school system, which they want to grant the easement directly to Belmont instead of us granting it to us and then we assign it to you. So I think that's a simple fix there. And then lastly, it's Belmont too, and that's the biggest challenge right now, getting them to play ball with us.
So it's primarily that second portion right up underneath the pit.
And that's all undeveloped land, right?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Any more discussion? Anybody want to make a motion?
I thought do we need a motion or not?
I defer to you on, is a motion needed or is it just consensus?
I think you ought to have a motion.
Okay.
Can't give you staff direction.
Martha made the.
I'll make a motion, and I'm not sure that I'm doing it correctly, Chip, that we continue the process of utility easement acquisition as far as an agreement to be brought back to us.
Well, I'll second.
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed? Opposed, okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item.
break tonight.
Project approval funding the Abbey Creek Greenway.
Thank you, Mayor. This item came to you last month at your January meeting for second reading. You asked to defer it to this month because you wanted to discuss the funding sources for the Abbey Creek Greenway during your council retreat on January the 28th and 29th. So nothing has changed on this since you considered it in January. This was approved by the City Council. The capital project ordinance was approved by the City Council on December the 6th by a 3-2 vote, which is, since this is an ordinance, requires a second reading because it lacked a 2/3 majority in general statute. So you started second reading in January and deferred it to this month. So I just give this back to you. It requires a second reading. It can be approved by the same 3-2 vote is acceptable on second reading. It's just not on the first reading for the ordinance.
I'll be glad to make the motion, but I want to talk a little bit about this particular project. We've talked about being visionaries and being ahead of the game. We're not with regard to greenways or green belts, as in some situations they're called. So I worked with Connect Gaston back in the 90s, partially to learn about how this whole process goes. We're looking at Mount Holly that has done a similar type of project, and it was costly. But we now have people from Belmont going over there to walk because we have an aging population that needs the paved walkway part rather than what you're looking at for the Rocky Branch and all that kind of thing. So to me, this is very important. I think we need to consider this too. Geraldine mentioned to me that there's actually a formula to figure out the economic impact for this. And so by the time we actually are looking at the cost part of it, assuming we approve this, then we'll have some more definitive kinds of things to deal with. So I think it's very important. Also, we have $400,000 of contributing money from the Morris Group, and then what's about $65,000 in grants. So if we continue this process and at least look at the cost figures, also we've been doing this since 2008. And I think I'm the only one of this group that walked that property all the way through. David Eisenhower was here, Sally Stevenson. So it's a really wonderful project with regard to walking the woodlands and the stream, all that kind of thing. And if you're looking at possible grants, we've got a great opportunity because it sounds kind of funny, but in reality, when you look at greenways, and this is way back in the 90s, if you have a destination, it's considered sexy. And so you have a much better chance of getting grants. The fact that we would have this all the way to the Riverfront Park, guys, this is making a major difference. And we have that opportunity. And to me, we would be short-sighted not to go ahead and at least pursue this to the numbers piece of it. So that's my pitch for that. Thank you.
And just to,
I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to add, just to confirm one more time, that this is just to send it to bid, correct?
Right.
To get the final price tag on it?
That's correct.
Yes, sir. So this authorizes us to continue working on the project. The City Council approved a contract with ESP Associates to do the design, engineering, and then easement acquisition and bidding. So we're paying them for that work. They have finished the design work as much as they can until we get easements. And so this would authorize us to continue working with ESP on a contract that you've already approved to get the easements. And then once the easements are secured, then then ESP would create the bid documents, which is under contract with us to do. And then we would take it out to bid. Then once the bids come back, you have a cost estimate from ESP based on that 75% design that you saw last year. Once the bids come back, we would bring it back to you for another council action. And if you're comfortable with the bid or the low bid at that point, then you would authorize us to accept that and move to construction. If you're not comfortable with that bid, then you would not accept it and we would not proceed with construction. So we're basically, we've taken this project and we've started it a dozen years ago or so.
2008.
2008. So we've taken it as far as we can now, and we need authorization to continue with this. So
It's also one of the top 10 projects with our Parks and Rec Board, and it's continued to be that. But I don't want to jump to any other discussion. I'll be glad to make the motion.
Well, I'll just say, I mean, you guys all know my position, $800 a foot, it's just too high. And I agree, we've got a portion of our population that is aging, but the median age in Belmont is like 34.9 years. So, I mean, there are some people who use it, but there's a lot of people who are fit to walk other trails. You know, another option, and we talked with Donnie Loftus about this during our retreat. You know, something to bring to the table is he said, you know, the Army Corps of Engineers, this is a perfect project for them. They look for these kind of projects to move the dirt. I said, we can build that greenway and we can cut your costs substantially. We need projects for our engineers to keep their skills sharp and to train our younger engineers. He said, essentially, you just have to pay for the gas. I mean, it's something to consider as far from the stewardship angle on this. This is a $2.1 million project. I mean, this route could substantially shave some of that cost off and still get it built.
Would anything that we decide today prevent us from doing that if that were an option?
no, sir.
So could we do that parallel? We
Sure.
send this to bid while also exploring the route for the, okay.
I'll
That
make
would
a
be
motion.
Because we would need to get easements anyway to do grading work and construction work on other people's property.
correct.
Do we need to approve this to send this to bid? Or can we send it to bid without? I mean, I guess my biggest hangup is the price tag, because, I mean, 2 million is already a lot. And I know that given the current status of the market, you know, anticipating an unpleasant surprise once it goes out to bid. So, you know, it's, I guess my position is kind of, you know, kind of cutting your losses, I guess. But, because if, I don't know, because like if this becomes like a $3 million project, I mean, once we get some bids back, I feel like that kind of changes the conversation a little bit. And then, you know, we've spent additional time and whatnot on a project that financially is getting more expensive. So, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is, do we need to do this to send it to bid, or is there a way to get pricing without?
Let me mention something to you for what's worth. Getting the people to do road or pathway with the military is very difficult to do today. It's hard to do. They don't have the time. A lot of times they don't have the time to do it, and it's just, we're going to be waiting a long time.
So yes, so we could certainly see if that's possible. But in the interim, the next step is to get the greenway easements across those other people's properties, the Armory, the Gaston College, the Adams Bluff neighborhood, and then a couple of those other parcels closer to the intersection of Park Street. Because we have to acquire those, we have to survey that easement, we have to acquire those easements, and then you can finish the design and then take it to bid. We're only at 75% design, so the last 25% is that real technical, detailed stuff needed by the easements. If you're not comfortable with us doing that, then you're basically directing us to cancel this project.
I see. Okay.
I'll make the motion
Well,
to approve the project ordinance unless we have further discussion.
We do. You know, to Mark's point, something to consider. You know, we approved a rec center. You know, original costs were 12 some odd million, but because of the environment that we're in, we're looking at a $13 million plus project. You know, if the logic is linear and holds true, then this project could very well come in at $3 million. I mean, I'm struggling with it right now at $800 a foot.
But on the other hand, you're looking at the rec center, and then we got another 500,000. We
Yes,
weren't
how much are we actually
anticipating.
going to be, if you're looking at what we're paying out of city funds for the rec center, I think it does come out to close to 12 million when you factor in the grants that we've received.
Yes.
And I agree, we were fortunate to get those, but grants are never guaranteed.
Well, we've got one coming up next on the agenda if it's relevant. I mean, it's only $30,000, but
Are there additional grants that we could during this process, because I'm assuming, I don't know how long the bidding process takes, but we have some time to do a little bit more due diligence. And again, I think I brought this point up last time, which is we're not committing to anything just to see what the final cost is, but we have spent $200,000 on design already for this, which if we just, without even knowing what the final cost would be throwing that away. And I do like also the idea of the Army, the National Guard or so coming in just to explore that route to see, even if they just did a portion, because you could portion it out, have the Boy Scouts come out for an Eagle Scout project. I was losing it. But no, I think there's other alternatives to maybe bring that cost down. But I mean, again, it's just sending it to bid.
Well, I mean, again, I don't disagree with that. I mean, philosophically, but I mean, keep in mind, the Belmont, look at what do we need? We have got a lot of paths. We've got Carolina Thread Trail. We got Rocky Branch. We've got places we can currently walk. I mean, to me, I'm just looking at it, I don't care how many grants we get for this thing, we're still going to be paying a lot of money out of pocket for it. People want roads. People want us to do certain things within roads, sidewalks. That's one of my concerns, is I said, where is council's priority? They want to target this money for this greenway when we've got real needs in some of our roads. And that's another, for me, that's also what I'm wrestling with.
I just think that's a false choice. It's not a choice. No one's coming to us and saying, here's, 2.1 million. You can either choose to build a greenway or you can make road improvements. Is there any reason why we can't make road improvements if we approve this today?
No, sir.
So it's not either or. We could, especially once everything with the audit and financing is completed or so, as it gets completed, it would free up.
And some of the road projects that we discussed at the retreat would be quite expensive. Would they necessarily be something that we could utilize as a item on the capital improvement project, or would we need like alternative funding?
We don't know how much it's going to cost to do the intersection improvements that you all discussed at the retreat. The ones on Julia Avenue would require utility relocation and potential right-of-way acquisition. You heard from Fred earlier, the intersection at, he's working at Main and Julia. You discussed Central Avenue and Julia where you had the special use permit. There's utility relocation that would have to be there. That can cost as much, if not more, than the construction itself, which is adding a turn lane. Mm-hmm. You also discussed converting the intersection of Central Avenue and Keener Boulevard into a roundabout. That's going to require, likely, it's going to require right-of-way acquisition, certainly utility relocation, and then construction. We don't know how much that's going to be. And we actually are working on getting a proposal to have somebody do those cost estimates so that you know what it is that you're looking at. But certainly that's not something we could cash flow. That's probably something that most likely, if you want to get into those more NCDOT style transportation improvements, you would couple multiple projects, put it together as a bond referendum.
And we need to do that regardless of whether, even if we scuttled this, we'd still need to do that. Is that correct?
Correct. And so you're looking at two different timelines.
And so would this be taking any money away from potential road improvements?
No, sir.
All right, I have a motion on the floor.
How is that possible? The money we're committing, our money comes out of the general fund, right?
Yes, sir.
Would any road improvements that we committed to do with the DOT, you're saying that we wouldn't have the option or we couldn't commit general funds to that project?
We would, yes, if you want to do NCDOT style projects, that would come out of the general fund.
Now, while we may have to float a bond, we could supplement it with general fund dollars.
Yes, so this is several hypothetical situations from now.
What I'm getting at is whatever available dollars we have, we direct them to the road improvements that we desperately need. Now, while the Greenway is a sexy project, people stuck in traffic and have these long transit times don't care how sexy that project is while they're sitting in traffic. That's what I'm saying is,
well, but you could say that with everything that we've done in the last however many years, though. I mean, do we need
a rec center, if we had used that money, the loan that we're getting for the rec center for the road improvements, they could already be committed to, yet we all voted for the rec center. Do we need a skate park? We could use that money to, use that towards road improvements, but you all voted for the skate park.
Well, while we don't have a rec center currently, not one that amounts to anything. We don't have a skate park, that's true. What we do have is a Rocky Branch Trail and a Carolina Thread Trail. We do have places to walk. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but we do not have a rec center. We do not have a skate
But do we need it?
Yeah, I would say that we do need a rec center.
But I mean, you could say, are the people that are going to be sitting in traffic think like, well, I'm sitting in traffic, thank God we have a rec center. I mean, you can play that. I mean, I'm just saying, you can play that logically to basically anything that we voted on for the past, however many years. So that's all I'm saying.
And I maybe shouldn't have said sexy if that's going to kill what I wanted to do. But at the same time, this is considered an alternate form of transportation. Greenway is. It's not just for fun, silliness, and all that kind of stuff, because you're getting people off the roads. Because people will bike, people will walk more if you have the kind of situation that this will be. Because you're talking about going all the way from Walgreen, where you're in apartments, people coming down Wilkinson Boulevard. So you're going to get people off the road if you get this kind of thing. It's kind of like that if you build it, they will come thing. So it's not just for fun and silliness. It's important.
Well, and is connectivity not one of our goals, our long-range goals that we set back in the day?
Yes, sir. And so I understand Mayor Pro Tem Turner's question about, every dollar that you have to budget is a choice how you spend it, and you have to prioritize how we don't have an endless amount of money. So yes, there are always choices that you have to make.
If only we were Congress.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're not Congress. You can't just print money. So we have been doing planning in a lot of efforts. We have a Parks and Rec master plan that identified this as one of the priorities. And this is one of the few times that we're actually on schedule on a plan. It said in this year we would work on the funding and design, and then we would start doing construction next year. So we're bringing this to you because it's time to bring it to you, because we've been talking about it for so long. It's time to either do it or not do it. We also have a financial plan, and through the capital improvements project list. So which we're working on now as staff, will be bringing that to you this spring on our various capital needs on the various departments. So far, you have recognized that we have needs for recreation, we have needs for planning, we have needs for public safety, we have needs for transportation, and we prioritize those to the CIP projects. And then when you're ready to proceed with those projects, then we figure out how to pay for them. But we build them into our 5-year budget plan. If you want to change that process and only focus on one area, such as transportation, we can certainly do that. It's totally up to the council on how to do it. You can direct us to stop work on all the public safety, on recreation, on planning and community enhancements, and just do transportation, and we can certainly do that. We would have more money to put to that because we wouldn't be spending it on all the other amenities. So it's totally up to you. But the reason we're here is because you directed us to bring you with the capital project ordinance for this project that we've been working on for several years now.
You made a motion.
I did.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. And
As
opposed?
proposed. As proposed.
How many opposed? 1,
Two.
2, 3, 2.
Thank you.
Next item on the
We're nothing if not efficient.
is consider the acceptance of the Carolina Thread grant for the Belmont Abbey Creek Greenway, for the Abbey Creek Greenway, $30,000 grant.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So just reaffirmed the Abbey Creek Greenway project, at least getting it to the next phase, which is right-of-way acquisition. Staff applied for a grant with the Carolina Thread Trail based on your April 2021 support for the project. The Carolina Thread Trail did grant us $30,000 to use toward the cost of right-of-way acquisition. Since this has been a hot topic amongst the council here for the last several months, we didn't want to accept this grant without knowing whether or not you supported the project. So now that you've committed to us going to the next step of right-of-way acquisition, I would recommend that you accept $30,000 to offset the city's cost and accept this grant from the Carolina Thread Trail.
I'll make a motion, we accept the grant.
Let me ask one question before we motion. In the event that, let's say, the cost for this greenway come back well in excess or right on target, and council decides that they have no appetite for that cost, does this grant, I guess this automatically would revert back and be then redistributed at that time to another municipality?
Well, I think it says I think the draft grant says something like, if we don't use it for that, we have to pay it back.
Well, it also says that we could petition, the applicant understands that use of the grant funds for purposes other than those described above the project must be authorized in advance by the grantor. So is that a caveat that we could redirect it if we wanted to?
With permission from the Carolina Thread Trail. So they're providing us we asked for a grant to help with right-of-way acquisition. Mm-hmm. They approved a grant for $30,000 for right-of-way acquisition. We can use that grant for right-of-way acquisition. If you want to use it for something else, we'd have to go back to the Carolina Thread Trail and ask for permission to do that.
Well, I'm just wondering, under a scenario where to say that the costs come back too high on this and we've got this grant, we could petition at that time to redirect it?
We will have already spent the money on right-of-way acquisition, which we have to do before we can go out to bid. So you won't know how much it costs until we have already spent this grant money.
All right, so we're going to secure right-of-way acquisition without knowing whether the council will have the appetite to do the project.
That's correct, because we can't get to bid without right-of-way acquisition.
So if we, just for my own clarification, if we spend the money on the right-of-way acquisition and then decide not to do the project, would we have to return the grant money?
No, sir, because it's being given for the specific purpose of right-of-way acquisition.
Martha, did you? I'll second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Very good.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is consider the acceptance of a proposal for Morrisburg Architects to provide architectural and engineering design services and construction inspection services for the Stowe Park restroom facility renovations.
So I ask our Assistant City Manager, Kevin Krause, to present this. I've spoken too much tonight.
Well, let me spend a little time and go ahead and give you the history about
No, we don't need history.
See what started
So back in Roman times.
Let's get to the end. So American Rescue Plan money, you gave us direction to use a portion of those dollars on the renovation of the bathrooms. Whenever you're using federal money, you have to follow the federal procurement process, which we've done here.
Is that the 25%? How does that work? I'm sorry.
Well, we're starting with, part one is just the procurement process of soliciting the.
That was what I was when is it solicit versus bids? That was what I was confused about.
We have to have bids as well. That's later in the process for construction. So am I answering that question correctly?
We're doing design services, which is a qualifications-based selection process first.
Okay.
We'll then go out to bid, which is a monetary-based process.
Thank
but
you.
that would be with the contractor.
That's why you see the RFQ as opposed to an RFP, or request for proposal.
Yes.
So all we can ask for, because of the Briggs Act, Briggs Act, help me, Mr. Attorney.
You're on your own.
There's it's not the Myers-Briggs, that's the personality test. There's some kind of a test that does require us to have a request for qualifications, which is what we did. We didn't ask for dollar amounts at that time. You can see the RFQ in your packet. We only received 2 proposals back, one from the firm in Hickory and then the one from the firm in Charlotte. And staff evaluated those proposals and recommended to select the one from Morrisburg Architects. And that's included. $52,500 is a lump sum proposal. That's for design, the construction documents, the permitting, preparing the bid package, and the procurement of the contractors, which at that point would be an RFP, so we would get dollar amounts at that point in time. And they would also handle the construction inspections. And that's a normal fee for design services. It's usually around 10% of your construction cost, and around $520,000 is what was estimated and what has been in your CIP. So we have that proposal for your consideration. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
I had one for sure, and one for Adrian. Do we need a resolution, or have we already passed one, like we're going to use ARP funds for this? Because I know we've done those with other projects. Or do we just go ahead?
So you're not required to do the resolution.
Okay.
We have done that just for record keeping, and if we haven't done one for the Stowe Park restrooms, we certainly can.
My other question was, I noticed that they were going to schedule construction from June through September. Is that wise? I mean, I don't know how this construction would be proceeding, but it seemed like I'd hate to render them unavailable during our events in the summer.
Yeah, that can happen definitely on our timeline.
Okay.
And so it depends on how quickly the design goes. We can definitely work within our timeline about going out to bid for the construction. And we have time to spend the ARP. So if we want to, we could time that for a time when it's not used as much.
Okay. And would they have to be closed while this is being done?
During the construction,
All right.
probably say yes, but I don't know if they could leave half and not.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right.
This would be a good winter project.
I would, yes. Agreed.
You want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Here a second.
Yeah, raise your hand.
Richard? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Unanimous.
Only one and none.
Thank you. All right.
Godspeed.
Don't brag, Kevin. It'll come back to get you.
Next.
Thank you, Mayor. That's all we have for the regular agenda. So you've got reports next. You've got draft minutes from the December Tourism Development Authority Board, the January 19th meeting of the Parks and Recreation Citizens Advisory Board, and the January 20th meetings of the Main Street Advisory Board and the DBDA. Those are just for your information. See what your boards are discussing. On the manager's report, I don't have too much. Just as a reminder, we've scheduled a field trip to go visit the Anchor House townhome development in Charlotte on Saturday, February the 19th. We'll meet here and take the bus, meet here at 9, leave at 9, so meet here at 8:50. 8:50 on a Saturday morning. You're probably already up, so.
Yeah, that's true.
So we'll leave here at 9 o'clock, be back here before lunchtime. And then, as we discussed at the retreat, we really do need to get started if we wanted to update the utility rate study in order to use that data to consider setting rates for our water and sewer customers for the upcoming budget. And associated with that, it's also time to update our system development fee study that we did about 5 years ago, and we're required to do that every 5 years. So I would like for if it's okay with you, to go ahead and start getting proposals to update that so we can get that work completed in order to have that information ready for you when we have budget workshops. And then I would remind you that the MPO is accepting public input on the Catawba Crossings project. There was an open house, I believe, last week, but they are still having the online public input. So if you haven't provided input on what you think about the Catawba Crossings project, you can click on catawbacrossings.com through this Sunday, February the 13th. So probably before the Super Bowl starts, you should submit your comments. And then the MPO will consider that in the feasibility study. One thing that we've looked at staff is this is a recommended 4-lane divided boulevard cross section with a 6-lane, as you see, bridge structure going from Belmont to Charlotte with 4-lane stripe with the ability to go to 6 lanes, which would allow the roadway to be widened to 6 lanes at some point in the future. They're not looking at South Point Road, so you're looking at a 4-lane road dumping onto, connecting to a 2-lane road, or potentially a 6-lane road connecting to a 2-lane road. So if you want to put in comments that say you should probably look at how this roadway interacts with South Point Road, this would be a good opportunity to provide input before Sunday. So that's just a concern that we have as staff. And I'll put that in as a resident, but look at that, please. So for anybody in the public, you can provide comments at CatawbaCrossings.com. And then just a couple follow-up items for the benefit of the public. You had what I thought was a very productive retreat recently, I guess a week or two ago, the 28th and 29th. It seems like a long time ago. And some of the outcomes from that retreat, you agreed to appropriate the $1 million in a state-directed grant to the North Belmont Public Safety Station to help kickstart that project. Had a discussion about the operations and the fees for the recreation center when it opens, and you agreed that you would not charge Belmont residents to use that facility because they're paying for that facility. But that, and we would not allow non-city residents, at least initially, because of the demand that we expect from city residents. So of course, non-residents can use it through city programs such as basketball and pickleball, and then events and tournaments. We did consider funding improvements at key intersections to alleviate traffic congestion. And so I've asked Kevin to get some proposals from engineering firms to do cost estimates so we can bring that to you so you can see what it's going to cost to get cost estimates to then determine if we want to do these projects. And then we're looking at updating the zoning ordinance to better manage growth on the South Point Peninsula, and looking at densities and lot sizes, as well as open space updates for commercial uses and better open space and residential uses. And then looking at our funding needs and the long-term maintenance of our facilities and our long-term operations. I know we're in the at some point in our growth cycle, but that at some point it's going to slow down. And so Councilman Zucks asked that we look at long-term, how our finances will stack up when we're no longer in the hot spot for growth. And then also one of the big topics for Saturday was potential uses that you would consider accepting for the Belmont Middle School when it gets redeveloped. And so out of that, you came up with a list of uses that you would consider supporting in a rezoning and a list of uses you would not consider supporting in a rezoning. We've taken that, created a document that we've put on our website and on our Facebook page and sent that to Gaston County, to their leadership, who then shared it to their board. And so the word has gotten out quickly of that. And so so I think that was a good use of your time on that. And you don't have any influence on the bidding process because that's handled by the county, but the types of uses you would consider supporting or not supporting through the rezoning process certainly exhibit some influence on who's going to bid on that. So I appreciate that time you spent on that. Yes, sir.
We got an interview. Don't forget.
We do.
Yes.
So that is all that I have for the manager's report.
All right, that brings us to other business. Alice, we'll start out with you.
Well, are we going to do the interview
We
first?
need to interview
I'm sorry,
Jennifer.
We got to get the
Jennifer.
Let's interview Ms. Simmons.
Simmons, that's right. Okay.
Well, if you can speak up so we can hear you.
Oh, Lord.
You want to come to the mic?
Sure.
All right.
We're going to ask you to go out there all.
Be careful heading back.
And be careful driving. All right, next we have other business.
2 minutes of
Go
fame.
down with Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just real quick, had my notes over here. So, just kind of coming off of the retreat, I know we kind of talked about the South Parkway and potentially 2/3 of it being acquired or taken on by NCDOT. Have we by chance gotten that in writing yet, or is that still something that's being discussed?
We did get an email, and
What I've gotten in writing is a statement from NCDOT saying they support the proposed design of 45 miles per hour and speed of 40.
So they have not committed to the.
They have not committed. They told me verbally, but the email they sent said that NCDOT will support that design for Belmont, Hollywood, and Sidewalk connector. So I emailed them back and I said, well, I'm looking for a little bit more in that, than looking for an amendment, and I haven't gotten a response. But I'm meeting with NCDOT like Thursday for the TIA, so I will get a better statement. But he did discuss it with the higher ups, and that's when he came back and said we should.
Okay, as it is today. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Just one more thing. Do what?
Nothing.
The National Guard thing. If we could look into that for Abbey Creek, and then I was just curious to look into it if possible. I don't know if we do it currently. If we do it, then just scratch it. But potentially business roundtables with our local Main Street businesses, and maybe even over there in East Belmont as well and North Belmont. I don't know if we do that currently, but I was just curious if we could look into that. That's all I have.
Just to build on what Alex brought up, please strive to get that commitment in writing. While they approve of the design standard, I want something that says we will also, not only do we approve of it, we'll maintain it.
Yes.
And I would encourage you to continue with Pulte Del Webb to see if they will come up to 40 and approach DOT about maintenance of the entire parkway, taking 1/3 of it off our shoulders. Other than that, South Main was paved recently, and I got a couple of pictures and a couple of texts from people, and I saw a video on Facebook. I don't know if they're intending on coming back and cleaning the roads and the sidewalks on South Main, but there's debris, there's chunks and dust all over the sidewalks everywhere, so they approached me about that. Is the city going to clean this up? And I walked it. It's pretty bad. And right across from the cemetery, there's a lot of chunks and bits and all kinds of asphalt on the sidewalk and in the curb and gutter. My personal experience, because I was going out, trying to get out of Dogwood was a little bit of an experience. I hate to disparage anybody, but what I saw on Facebook and what I saw personally, this paving crew appeared at times to be unprofessional in their dealings with the public. They honestly looked overwhelmed at times, like they were not quite sure how to direct the traffic. I mean, during that paving process, there was no flow of traffic. There was nobody out there leading that process. Nobody looked like they knew how to lead that process. I don't know if you saw the video on Facebook where a citizen of Belmont and someone from this company are swearing back and forth at each other. When I saw that, I was just like, who are these people and why are they working for this paving company?
Who's the paving company?
it was asphalt paving NCDOT project and an NCDOT contractor.
Okay. Well, maybe we need to talk with them because I also, to be honest with you, I had concerns. They paved Dogwood Lane on 2 different days because of the weather. I was looking at some of the seams on there. I'd love it if Jerry would look at those seams on South Main where they join those 2 roads. Even on the curb and gutter, it looks like there's a little bit of gapping on South Main, which I don't pave roads. That can't be good when water freezes and sinks into those gaps. So that's, That's one of the comments that I would like to make, is maybe we need to take a follow-up look at the work they did.
So I did get your message about that last week, and I did notice the sidewalks, and it looks terrible.
Yeah.
Because they apparently milled the curb and gutter, because it was paved all the way. They milled that, and so we have a concern that some of our storm drains are now elevated above the pave, or above the curb and gutter, so curb and gutter's not going to get the water to where it needs to go. So we have concern about that. So I did reach out to NCDOT today and ask them if they would come back and inspect the work that was done, because of our concerns about how it's going to potentially impact our stormwater, but also to clean up the mess. And they appear to have done a good job on the paving, and the drive feel of that road is so much better than it was then before the work, but they did leave a mess. And so Blake did say they would put it on the punch list.
Well, just one other thing, just to build on what you were saying, we had this same conversation at the MPO when it was the Parkway about the road situation, which you pointed out was South Point Road. The Parkway was going to, dump out into the New Hope Road area. And a lot of conversation about, you're creating a scenario that you brought up is basically you're going to have a 4-inch pipe dumping into a 2-inch pipe. And hopefully they're looking at that again for South Point Road and take it seriously, because 4 lanes feeding in 2 lanes is going to be a problem no matter where you do it. So
I would suggest that you use the public comment tool at CatawbaCrossings.com.
yeah.
A couple things. Did Dixon Village break ground? I thought I saw something that situation was rectified, where they were having the dispute with the neighbors over. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Has there been an upset bid on the Belmont Middle School? Do we know? Because I think the 10-day period would be about now.
2 more days.
Oh, a couple more days. Okay. And then maybe Adrian, I know you sent us an email, but for the record, since we've had some comments about the leasing versus ownership in our decisions, could you maybe summarize that email just for the record that you sent to us regarding our what the School of Government said about that, at least officially?
Yes, sir. I will do my best and ask Parks and Shelley to clean up anything I say that's incorrect. Essentially, we've reached out to the School of Government. You do not have the authority to regulate property ownership. So whether that be for an office building that would be rented out by different businesses, or that's rented by or that's used by whoever builds it, the same way you would just look at the land use. With residential, you can't distinguish between for sale condominiums versus for rent apartments. You look at the land use of land use as multifamily. You can regulate height, density, parking, landscaping, but you can't regulate the ownership of it. And now we have these new developments that are single family detached homes that are built to be rented as a community. We've got one in Belmont and one that's being built now. You don't have the authority to regulate ownership, so you can't require that they be built for sale only or for rent only. If that was you're looking at the land use and the impact. So your purview is regulating the zoning, the land use, and presumably the impacts to land use from someone renting a house versus owning a house are similar. So you don't have that authority. Now, homeowners associations, which are not the city, homeowners associations do have the authority to regulate ownership to a degree. So if this is a concern of the council, then it could be that it's best handled through the CC&Rs that a homeowners association would put for all the residents of that homeowner or of the residents of that neighborhood that would have to follow. So homeowners associations can do things that are more stringent than the city, We don't enforce homeowners' covenants. Those are private matters. But any influence you have directly on ownership regulation is very limited.
Yeah.
I want to just thank everybody for the patience tonight. It took a long time to get through this meeting tonight. But thank you very much for being here. Martha?
We talked about several intersections, one being Julia Avenue and maybe turn lane. I think it's fine to pursue looking at what the cost might be and what would be involved. But I want to make it clear, I don't think it's wise for us to look at the Keener Central intersection because that's state DOT. Until we have Mark Stafford, Blake Guppy weigh in and say, okay, this is what we think would be workable and would not be. There's a substantial amount of right-of-way that was acquired when Keener Boulevard was built. If you have occasion, look at the concrete stub that is on the Stowe Manor property because that has already been acquired. So there is some idea in mind that someone had about what needed to happen eventually. So I want those two guys to weigh in before we look at spending any money with regard to that. Thank you. That's all for me.
I think it was at our December meeting, we pledged, I guess is the best way to put it, like some money towards the light rail design, with the idea being that the other municipalities in the county might reciprocate. Do we know if any of that happened, or? Because I hadn't heard
from
anything,
anyone else.
so, okay.
And the direction that we received and gave to our colleagues from around the county was to get on this quickly and work on that over the holidays and the first part of this year. So they're now most of them are having their February meetings, this week and next week. So I'll reach out to my fellow managers to see if anybody else has pledged that.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm not aware of any.
Yeah, I hadn't heard anything either, and I thought it was kind of weird. So, but that's it.
We want to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Go ahead.
Who's gonna make the motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Thank you.